So today I'm going to talk about Black Christmas, the 1974, 2006, and 2019 versions. I had to think there a minute. Um, I'm not going to go super in depth on the plot of the movies, just kind of give you an overall basis of plot so that I can talk about details. So, of course, there's going to be spoilers. I'm also going to be having a lot of intermittent rants on feminism. So, if that's not your thing, thanks for stopping by. Um, while I would consider myself a feminist, I have a lot of critiques regarding feminist film critique in that it doesn't make any damn sense. So, um, yeah, stay tuned for that if you're interested. And I usually write a script out, but I just did bullet points. But I have like 6 pages worth of bullet points because I want to make sure I'm hitting all the things that I want to hit. So, I will be looking down at my notes for that. If that bothers you, because apparently it bothers some people, I don't get it, but okay, sorry. Anyway, first movie, Black Christmas, 1974. It was directed by Bob Clark, who also directed Porky's and A Christmas Story. And it was written by Roy Moore, who I'm not really familiar with. Anyway, so the plot of the original Black Christmas 1974 is a man breaks into a random house, which happens to be a sorority house, during Christmas break in Bedford, which is owed to Bedford Falls from It's a Wonderful Life. He begins making obscene phone calls and goes into these insane rants, and it seems like he's probably having some sort of psychotic episode, and he's talking about mommy and Agnes and Billy, and because of this we have come to call the killer Billy, and he in the 2006 version is specifically acknowledged as being named Billy. But in this film, we just assume his name is Billy. He, throughout the entire film, is just a random person, and we don't really know anything about him whatsoever, which is honestly kind of interesting. He ultimately kills 3 to 4 of the sorority girls, the house mother, a police officer, and a 13-year-old girl in town. So I would first want to say, like, whoever is doing the voice of Billy did a phenomenal job. The rest of the acting, however, is kind of subpar. It's okay. I mean, Margot Kidder's in it, so you feel like it would be amazing, but it's just like, I don't know, man. It's a 70s movie. It did good for its time. The dialogue is fine. Some of it's kind of stunted and weird and awkward, but the emotion at the end of the day works, and that's really what needs to work more than anything else. To me, it's really the cinematography that makes this movie stand out. There's a lot of like POV shots from Billy, we assume, the killer. There are a lot of like shots that have like kind of interesting angles. It's, to me, a horror movie that absolutely holds up, even though a lot of other movies have like replicated some of the stuff it was doing. It was an early slasher film, and I'll get a little more into that later. But yeah, this is still a movie that absolutely works. I love that early on the sorority women go to the police. Love that. Because that's very realistic. And even more realistic, they're not believed by the police. And it's not until one of their boyfriends comes in and starts raising hell that the cops start to take them seriously. Fun fact, the guy who plays the main cop is also the main police officer and Nancy's dad in A Nightmare on Elm Street, which is just kind of a fun connection. One of the women, Jess, is pregnant and wants to get an abortion, which I think is one of the things that makes this movie stand out a lot more on a different note. And one of the reasons I'm going to be talking about feminism throughout this, as well as just the whole 2019 movie. So Jess wants to get an abortion, and her lover, Peter, is just kind of a prick, and he's really against it. I would say Peter's not very believable character. Sometimes you unfortunately sacrifice relatability and realism to forward the plot. Because Peter needs to serve as a red herring. You need to think that Peter is Billy. So I didn't particularly find him to be very realistic. But you know, the movie works, and again, that's what needs to happen. Peter ends up actually getting killed by Jess, who is at that time seemingly the sole survivor, and she's hiding in the basement from the killer, totally terrified. And Peter just waltzes in, so sus and creepy, and she's already cornered and traumatized and afraid, and she ends up killing him. And I'm not saying Peter deserved to die, but I am saying it was very cathartic. So the film ends with Jess left alone in the house, asleep or well, unconscious, and there's a police officer outside. The killer is still in the house, and the film, like literally, the credits roll as the phone rings, and it is implied that Jess dies. If Jess is killed, the body count for Billy, presumably Billy, is 7, and then the body count for the movie is 8, as we know. Jess killed Peter either way. It's a simple film, you know, girl splits up from the group and dies because crazy guy's gonna crazy. And it's built off like the urban legend of, you know, the caller's in the house while, you know, the girl's babysitting. It just happens to take place during Christmas as a kind of a way to say that like bad things happen year round, and it subverts the safe space of home as well as the holidays. It's taking two ideas that we come to rely on as being comfortable and making them terrifying, which is very uncanny and tends to make you more uncomfortable, which is another reason why I think this movie works really well. Black Christmas, as I mentioned earlier, is an early slasher. It's one of the first slashers. And it is, as far as I know, the first to be set during a holiday. And as we know, many films follow this. Probably most famous would be Halloween, which came out 4 years later, 1978. And a lot of people do compare Black Christmas to Halloween. I'm going to too. No reason why. I would like to comment that, like, Bob Clark, I'll quote the Wikipedia page. Clark felt that college and high school students had not been depicted with any sense of reality in American films. Side note, Black Christmas is a Canadian film. And he said he intended to capture the astuteness of young adults. College students, even in 1974, are astute people. They're not fools. It's not all bikini beaches and bingo. And he didn't specifically want to objectify women and like show nudity, and he wanted the female characters to come off as real people and not just body counts, which I really like. And I think this movie tried to do that, and compared to modern horror movies, and I've seen my share of horror movies, I think it does one of the better jobs of portraying, you know, the fact that people have brains and think logically. As I said, I don't think the acting is great in this movie. It's, you know, it's fine, and that might be from the perspective of my age. These women would be like my grandmother's age, and so maybe I just don't relate. And it's, you know, it's a 70s horror movie, so, you know, I don't know, people act weird in movies. But like I said, for the most part, they're being smart, and I like that. And they are being a lot smarter than, you know, most women in films in the US would portray them as. Oh goodness. The only thing that comes off as unrealistic would be, as I mentioned earlier, Peter. I think it's unrealistic for a guy in his 20s to be really excited that I mean, they're supposed to be in college, right? So I think it's unrealistic for a college guy to be excited and say, oh, that's great, when his girlfriend, who definitely is in college, says she's pregnant. That to me is unrealistic. And to get like upset that she wants an abortion, I don't know, I've met my fair share of college guys and chicks, and I've literally never heard any guy being cool with it that his girlfriend's pregnant at, you know, at that age. Maybe I just know assholes. That could be. Anyway, the only other unrealistic thing is the girls splitting up. Like, once they know that, like, there's probably a killer and they're getting, like, weird phone calls. Nah, man, we stick together, and then, like, we travel in packs. That's not happening. That's not happening at all. But, obviously that needs to happen for the movie to happen. So, yeah. It's okay. You can't have a fully realistic cast, because then for the most part your movie's only going to be 5 minutes. This movie, Black Christmas, is a cult classic for a great reason. And I definitely see why Halloween, though, is kind of the more beloved one, because it's just a better movie. But I definitely wish more people were aware of Black Christmas 1974. I was actually really surprised not a lot of people have seen it. Um, but with that, I don't think it created as many of like tropes that Halloween did. Like the Survivor Girl, Scream Queen kind of tropes that we see today. So I kind of wish that Black Christmas had been the more popular movie, and maybe we'd have like more well-rounded characters. um, but I don't think, based on what I've read, that Black Christmas intended to be a political movie with any kind of like feminist messaging. I think it did it just kind of by accident of just involving that conversation about abortion. And again, they really just had that there because they needed Peter to be kind of shown as an asshole, and I think that was the smart way to do it. But I'll get more into that kind of stuff when I talk about the next two films, so I could have something to compare and contrast it to with my wild shenanigans, which I apologize in advance for. Onward! Alright, Black Christmas 2006. This movie has a cast. I forgot to say it was directed by Glenn Morgan, who is a guy. But anyway, back to the cast. Katie Cassidy, Michelle Trachtenberg, Mary Elizabeth Winstead, Lacey Sherbert. Sherbert? I'm going to stick with that even though I know it's wrong. Andrea Martin, Crystal Lowe, Oliver Hudson. Oh my goodness. So many people, and they all gonna die. All of them, except for Katie Cassidy. Let's get on this murder train. Actually, murder. Okay, no. I don't want to get into that movie. Maybe I'll come back to it one day. So this movie is trying to be a remake. It's trying to be like the original. Yeah, trying. So there's a killer. Okay, so there's a killer. We definitely know there's at least a killer who breaks into a house and stalks and harasses and murders a group of sorority girls. For sure. It is later revealed there are two killers. I'll get into that. It doesn't have the political messaging that the first film had. The acting is not great, which is crazy considering the cast. Did I mention the cast? Because of the cast. And it replaces the great filmmaking from the first one with over-the-top gore. And this movie is just like, it's campy, which is probably why I love it so much. I love camp, and this movie is just that. We're treated to in-depth flashbacks about the killer, Billy. Like, we officially get he's named Billy in this. The flashbacks are scattered all throughout the film. Don't know why I said it with such a weird accent, but I did. And we're giving details into Billy's horrible childhood. So supposedly, the original director, I think, or the script writer, I think it was director though, Bob Clark, actually came up with the backstory, and Glenn Morgan just used that and was a little bit inspired by a real life killer. Oh, I'll get into that. Yeah. It's Rob Zombie kind of did the same thing when he did his remake of Halloween, going into Michael Myers' backstory. I'll get into the issues. Okay, so first and foremost, less is more. I'm going to paraphrase feminist film theorist Barbara Creed. Monsters are uncanny. We keep them veiled in the shadows. Monsters come from the word monster, which means to warn or to show. With its unusually horrific features, monsters demand to be seen. To generate suspense and a sense of uncanny and effective, underline that word, effective horror film does not immediately put the monster on full display. Instead, it offers fleeting glimpses or quick, disturbing glance. So remember, less is more. Learn from Jaws. The end part was mine. I stopped paraphrasing. Should have mentioned that. Okay. Yeah, less is more. Generally speaking, more effective horror movies don't generally reveal the killer fully. That just it's a better way to build suspense. The first movie absolutely did that to like A plus, 10 out of 10. Very well executed. Another issue is that gory doesn't mean scary. This movie is R-rated, and it definitely does up the gore factor compared to the original and compared to, I'll get into the 2019 one, but it's kind of dumb gory, like it's stupid looking, which is why it's campy, and again, why I like it. And I also like the kind of giallo lighting they have going on with like the harsh green and red for the Christmases with the yellow for the character of Billy, because he, again, has like the most insane case of jaundice. Anyway, the issue with the flashbacks all over the place, it's not really great. So the only time you should have flashbacks not contained to one place is if as you're flashing back, you're revealing something. While it's not a great movie, I think Malignant did that pretty well, where it's like there are multiple flashbacks kind of scattered, and as you see them, you're getting more of the story so that the reveal of in the present coincides with the reveal in the flashback, if that makes sense. Hopefully everyone's seen Malignant. Yeah, so I don't necessarily think the flashbacks were necessary, and if they wanted to give the backstory, they either should have just front-loaded the beginning like Rob Zombie did in Halloween, or they should have had a shorter flashback take place while Oliver Hudson's character was explaining the story to the sorority girls, so he would be narrating it as it was happening in the flashback for the audience. But we don't really get any more information about Billy. Like, the information we get about him isn't necessary for his killing spree. And it creates more questions. I got questions about Agnes. So many. But before I get into that, let me just really quick go over the kill count. So, from the flashbacks, we learned that Billy has a mommy and a daddy, and Billy's mom starts to have relations with another guy, and that guy and her murder his father, which he witnesses. He gets locked in the attic, and his mom just hates him. She's very abusive. He ends up siring a child with his own mother due to an abusive situation. That daughter is Agnes. Again, I have so many questions about Agnes. So many. Okay, so Billy was institutionalized after he murdered his mother and her newer husband. And Agnes was sent to an orphanage, I think. So Billy and or Agnes kill Claire, Megan, Dana, Eve, Heather, Melissa, and Lauren. That's 7. Agnes specifically killed Kyle and Lee. Billy specifically killed his mom, stepdad, a coroner, security guard, and a Santa Claus dude. Not the Santa Claus dude, but just a Santa Claus dude. And then the survivor girl is Katie Cassidy's character, Kelly, and she kills Billy and Agnes. So according to Randy's rules, this is an okay sequel / remake because body count's higher. So to Agnes. Why was she there? How was she there? Why is she a killer? Why is she being played by like a 40-year-old dude when she's supposed to be like a 20 to 24-year-old chick? Was Agnes actually like born? Is this like a sleepaway camp thing? Was Agnes born male and then the mother just like raised her as a girl? I know realistically they wanted, no, that actually doesn't even work because like realistically I'm assuming the reason behind casting the guy to play Agnes was that they wanted there to be a reveal that there are 2 killers and one is Agnes. So they wanted like the physicality to be more interchangeable so you wouldn't know if it was Billy or Agnes. But usually they would just hire like a stunt person, and then when it's revealed, it's just a normal like the actor playing them. So it would still be a woman, but the stunt person would be a guy when it's like when they're like still masked. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? I don't think that makes sense, but I'm gonna go with it. Yeah, so like the reasoning behind hiring a man just like doesn't make sense to me. I don't think he was a behind the screen kind of guy. Like he was a camera operator, So, I mean, like, way to go. I don't think he did anything else after that. And, like, a great opportunity, but it just doesn't make sense, like, at all. And also, in that, so, like, Agnes is actually, like, the primary killer. She kills more people than Billy. So it kind of bothers me that we're getting all of Billy's backstory, and Agnes is just kind of like, we kind of get her vague backstory through Billy's. And based on what we learned about Agnes through Billy, Agnes should kind of hate Billy. He ripped out her eye and ate it in front of her on Christmas. That's insane. It doesn't, like, how did they know to break out together? Did he abduct her? Like, I just don't understand. Like, and how did they both know? It just, are they psychic? Do they have like a telepathic link to each other? I just have questions. It just doesn't make sense. Anyway, it's dumb plot twist. Moving on. Okay. I'm about to go on a really long rant here, and I'm going full true crime podcast. So sorry. Okay, so apparently this story was mildly inspired by a real life murderer, Edmund Kemper, who was arrested in 1973. The part that was inspired was that he apparently had been maybe locked in a basement by his mother, and he did go on to murder his mother, as well as her best friend, and his grandparents, and 6 girls and women between the ages of 15 and 22. I had a lot of opinions on this whole thing. I kind of take issue with the demonizing of his mother, because I was reading a lot of accounts, and some of them are a little different. Like, some say he was locked in the basement, some say he just had to move down into the basement. But all of the accounts of his mother are from him and his dad. And his mother and father had divorced, and the way his father talked about his mother was not in a good way. However, like, I've known quite a few people who've been divorced that talk about their former spouses in similar ways. I think just, when you get to a point where things are just so toxic that you can't stand the person, it's kind of hard to talk well about them. And though I do think it's really unfortunate when people talk badly about their former spouse in front of their children, that doesn't do anybody any good. But like, she seemed like a normal person. Like, I'm not seeing her, like, I've read stuff about serial killers where it's like, oh, that their parent was horrific. Their parent was like, my God, no one deserves that. Hitler wouldn't deserve that. But his mom didn't. I mean, I wasn't there, but like, his mom didn't. I'm not seeing any accounts that actually show she was a bad person. I'll get into this. So, I'll explain the situation first. So, this is a woman who lives alone with her 3 children. She has 2 little girls and the boy, Edmund Kemper. He grew up to be like 6'9". By the time he was 15, he'd already reached the height of 6'4". I don't know how tall she was or anything, but like, this is a big boy. This was as a kid, someone who early on displayed some very serious emotional issues. Like, he was killing neighborhood cats, and he would like do really weird, grotesque things to his sister's dolls, and he would say like really weird things about like killing women. So, single mom in the 50s, you got 2 girls, you got this huge boy, you only have 1 bedroom for all 3 of your kids. Listen, I'm not saying it's right, but like, I probably wouldn't want that boy sleeping in the same room with the girls. Like, I don't know what resources in the 50s were around for like a parent who thinks their kid might have very serious problems. But I mean, even today there aren't great resources. I'm assuming there were less in the 50s. So that's just a bad situation. And, maybe she didn't handle it right, but, you know, if you want to keep all three kids alive, I don't know, maybe the one kid can go sleep in the damn basement. Is that right? No. But, like, in a hard situation, sometimes you make bad choices. I don't know. But I also, when this is what really bothers me, is that um, the overwhelming knowledge that is public about this woman comes from the human being who assaulted and murdered her, which is, yes, her son, which makes it even more disgusting. And maybe this man who brutally murdered 9 women isn't the best judge of character for women. Like, if I'm ever murdered, I don't want my murderer being the one talking about me. You know what I mean? Because, like, they probably, I'm just saying, they don't have a good judge of character of you. Maybe I'm crazy. I do want to say, I know the Weinsteins, let me walk that back. Bob Weinstein was very involved in this movie and made the director change a lot of things. Um, and so I think with this movie, they originally kind of wanted it to be about like the family dynamic between like Billy, Agnes, and the mother Constance. I can't remember. And it is worth talking about, like, how trauma can affect someone. Although I don't like the mentally ill person escaped from the asylum and goes on a killing spree, because I do think that does perpetuate a lot of negative, incorrect stereotypes about people who are mentally ill. But, people who have traumatic childhoods who do go on to do like really heinous crimes, I think, it can go both ways. You can feel bad for the person for having a traumatic childhood, as well as, you know, make sure they take responsibility for their crimes, provided that they are mentally stable enough to be cognizant and understand what they did and have understanding of what they were doing while they're doing it. Um, I don't think I think there is a tendency to demonize murderers and not necessarily see them as people, even if they are a legitimately ill person, and that's unfortunate. Like, ill people do not deserve to go to prison. They should go to hospitals. There's a difference between, like, well, fictitious Norman Bates, real life Ed Gein, versus like real life Ted Bundy and fictitious Hannibal Lecter, with the latter two cognizant and understanding and knowingly doing really heinous acts, and the former two not understanding and not really being in control. And everyone in those situations is a victim, and that's really tragic. Um, I just really hate that, like, the accounts of women are coming from the disgusting people who murdered them. That's not right. And oh, so another thing I noticed, I'm just throwing this in here real quick, is that, so he was arrested, Edmund Kemper was arrested in 1974, and I hear a lot of people, like, I was listening to, like, people talk about it, and I was reading up on articles, and a lot of people incorrectly say that he's serving a life sentence. He actually does have the option of parole. He's been up for parole a number of times. The earliest parole hearing he had was 1979. He was arrested he went to prison in late 73, so he served all of 74 to 79 before being up for parole. Now, he's been up for parole quite a few times, a dozen times, and has been denied each time, but he's not serving like a life sentence without possibility of parole, which, did I mention, brutally assaulted and murdered in the most heinous ways I didn't mention 6 women, as well as in addition to his mother, her best friend, and his grandparents. So he's murdered a total of, that we know of, 10 people, and he has gotten parole hearings starting 5 years after he was sent to prison. Like, I get like not having the death penalty, but the fact that this person has been eligible for parole is beyond me. Thank you for listening to my ramblings. Back to the movies. So I think a better, like more realistic story would be just a random guy coming to the house because it's cold, I guess, and starting to kill people, kind of like The Strangers. But I will give this movie, the 2006 version, a kudo for having there be a blizzard, which makes it impossible for the women to really go out and get help, or for anyone from the outside to come and help them, because it leaves them more contained and isolated. So that way we don't have to like dumb down the female characters. So yeah, I guess that's a benefit. But I don't hate the idea of having two killers. I just don't think it makes sense, or there needed to be another scene to explain why, Agnes was there, because it literally just doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense at all. And also, like, having Billy and Agnes go back to their house to kill the people in their house, very Halloween 6, Curse of Michael Myers, and 8, Resurrection, and Halloween Kills. I don't know what number that would be considered. Yeah, but like Halloween and Black Christmas just kind of do the same things as each other. It's a nice little dance. It's not a nice dance. It's a dance. So that brings me to the 2019. I don't want to talk about it. Black Christmas, which is directed by Sophia Takal. I hope I pronounced that right. Apologies if I didn't. So I didn't mention that the 2006 version, and even more so the 2019 version, kind of come away from like the Callers in the House, which is what the original Black Christmas is perpetuated on, because it's a little difficult to do in the era of cell phones. Not many people have landlines. But it doesn't mean like you can't do that. You could still do a very creepy, like a killer is in the house. It just doesn't necessarily work as a caller is in the house. So I think, and we have you don't need to rely on the phone situation as much to have a scary story. I don't understand why the 2019 version is a version. It is Black Christmas in title alone. They probably would have been better off calling it something else. It brings back to me Halloween Season of the Witch, the third one, the original third one, where you kind of abandon everything but like one aspect. In this case, instead of, I guess, okay, they kept two aspects. They kept it on Christmas and it's in a sorority. But yeah, I think maybe they would have been better off making like the Society remake, or like a Stepford Wives remake or something. So what's the plot? What is the plot? So there's like at least two sororities and a fraternity at fictional Hawthorne College. This one chick, Chris, is an activist who got the bust of the university founder, Hawthorne, removed, and it's placed in the founders fraternity. I already have a question. Do universities have their own localized fraternity? Because like I've never heard of that. Most sorority, fraternity, honor societies are not limited to one school. They have chapters in a bunch of different schools. I've never heard of like a founders a founders fraternity. That's kind of strange to me, but I mean, maybe. I don't know. Maybe it's like an Ivy League school thing. Anyway, there are evil frat boys who find the statue bleeds toxic masculinity, literally that's supposed to be bleeding toxic masculinity, and they begin doing this like eyes wide shut shenanigans with it, and like brainwashing other guys. I think that's the plot. And then randomly culminates on Christmas break when the frat boys break into at least two sororities and start attacking and killing the women there. It's very Elliot Rodger incel sadness. Yeah. So our two named survivors are Riley and Chris, as well as some other chicks from the other sorority, whose names, I mean, they're mentioned. I didn't catch them. They fight back. Riley breaks into the frat house and breaks the bust of Hawthorne, and then the other chicks arrive as backup, and they go into an all-out battle. No joke, it's a literal battle. It's like right out of Braveheart. I don't know what's happening. It ends with the women burning down the frat house with the guys inside. It's my biggest issue with this movie is actually the filmmaking. It's just kind of boring cinematography wise, especially compared to the first movie. And also you can physically see the PG-13 cuts. It's so glaring. I don't know when people are gonna learn that horror movie fans don't like PG-13. I don't know. It's very crazy. Anyway, I know most people are like, boo-hoo, it's too preachy, and you know, okay, yeah, it does have you can make a very feminist film that has similar messaging and be more nuanced, have allegory, allusion, metaphor, which I think would have been better. Although even some of those movies aren't really liked, you know, stuff like Teeth, Swallow, Censor. Censor would probably be like the most kind of in sync with the messaging. And I'll do a fan fiction read right below, but you know, sometimes I don't think most people like it when you're it's like explaining the joke. Like, no, just tell the joke, don't explain it, and move on. Again, nuance. I mean, there was a lot. The script wasn't great. Like, there was a lot I didn't get. Like, so the one guy, Marty's boyfriend, Nate, he started going evil, and like hearing ringing in his ears, and started acting like an asshole. I don't know why. Was he a pledge, or was he brainwashed by the statue, even though he wasn't a pledge? It's very psychology versus sociology, and I was just confused as to which route they were going. Like, are all men affected by it, or just the guys in the fraternity? They kind of seemed like they didn't want to pick a route. I just don't get it. And then why wasn't the other dude, like creepy sweater guy Landon, he seemed like he wasn't affected at all until he got like the secret of the ooze triangle on his head. So I don't know who's affected and who's not. And then also, like, why did the professor, like, why did he have keys to the fraternity? I'm just very confused. And the chick, Helena, why did she go all Stepford? Did she get oozed too? I just need another scene, like, explaining some of these things. A lot of scenes. Maybe there was a different cut. I'm sure they have an R, like an R uncut, unrated cut, but like it like the movie doesn't fully work without some of those scenes though, so that's not great. I do want to give it some praise, because it does get some stuff right. Like having the women hold the keys in their fists as a weapon was fucking perfect. Having the guy being kind of creepy and weird without realizing he is, very real. The low-key passive-aggressive threats from the dude with power, very real. Very, very real. Having the frat boy friend of your assaulter, and even the assaulter himself, harass the main chick, what the fuck was her name? Whatever her name was, Imogen Potts, character, very real. And I really love what Imogen Potts was doing in terms of how the trauma was visualized. I thought it was done very well. She's a really good actor. Um, and with all that, I would say like the assault, revenge, exploitation movies, they became popular in the 70s, kind of with the fall of the Hays Code and the rise of sexual liberation and second wave feminism. But most of those movies back then, and even like assault, revenge movies today, are made by men. I really like and prefer seeing them with female writers, and if so, if it can be done, female directors, because you can see a massive difference in how they're depicted. Um, Sophia Takal doesn't show Riley. That's the character's name. Doesn't show Riley, Imogen Potts' character, being assaulted. Yes, fucking perfect. They show the emotional reaction, and it's done really fucking well, because you don't need to show the assault itself to get the point across. And when women are part of telling these stories, I do think they're done better, because there's just in general a deeper understanding. I know a dude directed this, of course, but a woman was the original writer and had a pot and had a hand in writing the script, like The Lovely Bones. They don't show you any of that, what happened, but you get what the implication is. And it's not, I mean, when you watch it, I've definitely seen movies where a woman gets assaulted and then it's the dude's like story to get revenge for her. It's no, don't do that. Stop. Really, seriously, stop. Yeah, so I love how that was handled in Black Christmas 2019. Okay. So I've been reading a lot of books on feminist film theory. I got criticisms. So I know this film is supposed to be feminist, but like it's really feminist through psychoanalysis. I'm gonna go on a whole rant about Freud, so buckle up. So there's two things I want to quote. First, the primary assumption of psychoanalysis is the belief that all people possess unconscious thoughts, feelings, desires, and memories. The aim of psychoanalysis therapy is to release repressed emotion and experience and make the unconscious conscious. And this is a theory that was created by Freud. So psychoanalytic feminism is a theory of oppression, which asserts that men have an inherent psychological need to subjugate women. The root of men's compulsion to dominate women and women's minimal resistance to subjugation lies deep within the human psyche. This branch of feminism seeks to gain insight into how our psychic lives develop in order to better understand and change women's oppression. The pattern of oppression is also ingrained into society, thus creating the sustained patriarchy. Okay, so that to me is kind of what this movie is trying to say, and I just vehemently disagree with it. It doesn't make any fucking sense. I will say Professor Wesley is right. A lot of terms and theories feminists use to articulate their theories were created by men in academia. So that's how academia works. It takes time to move past old ideas. Case in point, we're still fucking learning about Freud. Also Lacan, who built on Freud. But like that's how academia works. Like you build on other people's theories in either positive or negative. So you agree or you try to disagree. So it takes time, and because back in the day women couldn't be in academia, they don't get to have the terms there. So that's how that works. Like early feminist film critics are Mulvey, Creed, and Clover. They adopted psychoanalysis as the methodology to analyze film, like the male gaze and stuff like that, and that's what stuck, which is so fucking stupid to me. It is I'm sure if you've heard of Freud, you've heard dick jokes. That's because psychoanalysis and Freud in general is very it's a very phallocentric model. that places women as lacking, other. Literally, women are called other, like capital O, other. We are other, as we are not male. We're uncanny because we lack a penis. There's a lot of like castration anxiety stuff that is just so dumb to me. And as a feminist, why the fuck would women be into him? I don't get it. Why were they like, Freud, yes, women are other because we don't have a penis, and that's why society sucks for women. What? Dumb. And if for Freud, I just don't understand Freud's deal. I'm assuming because he was on a lot of coke. Why does everyone get pervy when they're on coke? I don't know. But it wasn't until like the 1990s that feminist film critics started like talking about sociology, which to me is it makes so much more sense than psychology to explain oppression, specifically systematic and systemic oppression. To me, this is just very much my opinion, a model of explaining bigotry isn't going to be rooted in psychology. It needs to be applicable for all forms of hatred. So like phallocentric and psychoanalysis models do not explain racism. And to me, racism and, sexism, anti-Semitism, all these things, they come from the same place, which is learned behavior, sociology. To me, actually, the Black Christmas 2019, it ends up kind of being pro-male because it removes the accountability of the male's actions by saying it's his psychology. It is not a learned behavior, and it's not something he's in essence responsible for, because like to not be an oppressive male would mean that he is like not mentally correct. Like what? That's what you're going with? That's so crazy. Yeah, that just does not make much sense to me as a human being. And further, it's kind of bothersome. Like going back to what I was expressing earlier, confusion with Nate's character. That's kind of the main reason I was saying it seemed like this film was using psychoanalysis as the model, because I'm assuming he's not a pledge, right? So it's all of these men are being affected by the ooze, regardless of whether or not they're in the fraternity. So that would imply that it is their psychology that is causing this, rather than it making more sense being a sociological influence. So it would be relegated only to the guys who were in the frat with the ooze being affected by the ooze. A man who is outside of the fraternity, that we see, clearly having a lot of interaction with the sorority women, would not have those like toxic masculine traits because they're not engaging with people who are perpetuating those behaviors, right? So they wouldn't have latched onto them. But who am I but someone with thinky thoughts? Who am I? So I have like basically the end here, just kind of fan fiction of what I would have rather have seen with a Black Christmas 2019 version. And I will say I'm going to try and keep this close to what Sofia Takal did, which to me, again, shouldn't have been called Black Christmas. I would have rather seen, a remake of The Society, which is a really fun 80s film. Would recommend. So anyway, I think Riley should be the killer. There we go. Yeah, I think Riley should be the killer, and we get like the beginning of the film plays out all the same up to the point where she sends Helen or Helena, whatever, home because she's drunk. Also, why did she send her drunk friend home in an Uber by herself? That is not safe. Do not do that. If you have a drunk friend, you send them on an Uber with another person whom you trust. Don't send them by themselves. That's fucking crazy. Anyway, yeah, so up to that point, she sees the whole, ooze thing, except that's not actually going to be anything. That's just, the frat boy rights. But she sees Helena almost getting assaulted by this frat boy a-hole who looks the exact same as the actor who plays her assaulter. I'm assuming that was done on purpose. Those two dudes, indistinguishable. Yeah, so up to that point, so she stays in the frat house and she starts killing the frat dudes. I love that idea. You're putting the men in a traditionally like feminized role and the female in the traditionally masculine role, and that right there in and of itself tends to make people very uncomfortable. And It's Still a Killer is in the house story set on a college campus during Christmas, and I like that we have a reason for it happening. She might even have some of those guys' phone numbers, so we can even do the callers in the house storyline. And it would be funny to see the guys going to the police and like them not being believed and stuff like that. Like, that would be interesting, having that kind of role reversal. And there's really no reason why we haven't gotten like I've seen a lot of horror movies and none come to mind of taking place in a fraternity house and a bunch of boys getting killed off one by one. Yeah, I think it could still have all those extremely feminist themes, and it could still make audience think about things, but it's also, we'd have a shift in perspective that's just more interesting, and it's still that assault revenge kind of fantasy. That's, kind of mildly empowering, but also super unrealistic, and it would make for a fun rated R movie. Yeah, so that's one idea. The other idea I had was to kind of keep the story basically what it is, but just have the professor be the killer. Just make it realistic. Have him get away with the killings. Make it more inspired by like Richard Spake, I think his name is, the guy who murdered all those nurses. Doing that. I don't know. Sometimes I think like when you make things unrealistic, they tend to be more feminist, and people think it makes it more feminist and more empowering, but it just makes it fantasy. And like I said, sometimes that's cathartic, but sometimes you want something that's real, but that's depressing, because realistic is depressing, because sometimes the world sucks. Yeah, that's really kind of all I had to say. That was a long rant. What are your thoughts on the Black Christmas movies, or on demonizing people through the words of their murderers? Or Freud? What are your thoughts on Freud? Let's really get into it. What changes would you make to the 2019 Black Christmas? Because I really like my idea of like a murderer coming in and just taking out a bunch of frat boys. Like, let's just do it, Let's just do it. I'm wearing a tie-dye shirt and a plaid shirt, which makes sense to me, and it's 2 a.m. and I'm gonna go to sleep now. I hope you all have a wonderful life. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.